There is a moment, and you know this moment, where something happens, and before you can think, you have already reacted. You are sitting in a room with people you know, or perhaps people you don't. Someone says something, a small comment, a slight shift in tone, and suddenly, something inside you has already moved. A heat in the chest, a tightening in the throat, a sudden urgency to explain yourself, laugh it off, or disappear entirely. By the time you realize what is happening, the reaction has already finished. You said the defensive thing. You went quiet. You adjusted your posture to look like you don't care. And then a few seconds later, you are watching the moment from a distance, wondering where that came from. That is not a flaw in your character. That is your mind doing exactly what it was built to do. Yet I see most people believe confidence is a loud, unwavering state. They think it is the absence of these sudden emotional spikes, that calm people simply do not feel what you feel. That is not accurate. Confidence is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to stay stable when the emotion appears, to feel the surge and recognize it as a signal, not a command. To become unshakable, you do not need to stop feeling. You need to understand the 5 emotions your mind uses to protect you before they start making decisions on your behalf. The first emotion, fear of judgment. We often reach for clinical labels for this one, but underneath the label is something far more human. When the fear of judgment appears, your mind is scanning for a threat to your standing within the group, not metaphorically, biologically. And the part of your brain that processes social rejection uses the same circuitry as physical danger. Being dismissed by a colleague and being cornered by a predator register in overlapping ways. So your mind responds with speed. You find yourself over-explaining. You give 3 reasons why you were late when one would have been enough. You rehearse what you are going to say before you say it. You scan the room for reactions before you have even spoken. This is not weakness. This is your mind running calculations in the background. How will this land? What will they think? What do I need to do to remain safe here? The behavior is efficient. The problem is that it fires in rooms where the threat is small, in situations where the cost of being seen is actually low. And each time you obey the fear, each time you over-explain, over-qualify, over-prepare, you quietly confirm to yourself that their perception of you is more real than your own. That confirmation is where confidence quietly erodes. The second emotion, anger, triggered by perceived disrespect. Anger is almost always misread, including by the person feeling it. We think of it as aggression, as losing control. But anger, in this form, is almost never an attack. It is a shield. When someone interrupts you, dismisses your idea, or speaks to you in a tone that carries subtle condescension, a flash of heat rises before you can evaluate the situation. That heat is a boundary alarm, a rapid response system designed to stop you from being pushed down. The problem is the speed. Because the anger arrives faster than your reasoning, it often dictates a reaction that creates the very instability it was trying to prevent. You snap. You go cold. You say something sharp that you spend the next hour regretting. The goal is not to never feel angry. The goal is to notice the moment the alarm goes off and recognize what is actually happening. The alarm is alerting you to a perceived threat. You do not have to fire the weapon simply because the alarm is ringing. There is a small gap between the signal and the response. That gap is where a different choice becomes possible. The third emotion, shame. After social exposure, shame is the quietest of the 5, and often the most paralyzing. It does not arrive in the moment. It arrives after. When the room has emptied, when the conversation is over, when you're alone and replaying what happened. You said something that landed wrong. You reacted in a way you did not plan. You were seen in a way you did not choose. And the emotion that stays is not sadness, exactly. It is the particular weight of feeling that something is already wrong with you. Not just what you did, but what it reveals about who you are. Your mind uses shame as a shutdown sequence. If you make yourself small, you become less visible. If you are less visible, you cannot be exposed again. It is a protection mechanism dressed as self-criticism. When you find yourself replaying a conversation at 2 in the morning, adjusting what you said, rehearsing better versions, that is not self-improvement. That is shame running a loop it cannot close, trying to retroactively fix a threat that has already passed. The loop offers no exit on its own. It only pauses when you recognize it for what it is, a protective reflex that has stayed past its usefulness. The fourth emotion, anxiety about uncertain outcomes. This one is the most familiar and the most misunderstood. Anxiety is not irrational fear. It is the mind's attempt to simulate every possible version of a moment before the moment arrives. If you can imagine every bad outcome, you feel, on some level, prepared. The anxiety is actually an attempt to manufacture safety through anticipation. It is a high processing tax you pay to feel like you are doing something about the unknown. But here is what it costs. It keeps you in a state of perpetual bracing. You are always waiting for the blow to land. And when you are always bracing, you never fully stand up straight. The confidence that comes from being present in a moment, rather than running simulations of it, never gets the chance to develop. The what-if engine hums in the background of nearly every decision. Not because something is wrong with you, because your mind learned somewhere that surprise carries a cost, and it is trying, in its way, to protect you from that cost. The problem is that the engine does not know when to stop running. The fifth emotion, the urgency to regain control. This one is the most subtle, and possibly the most exhausting. It is the restlessness that appears when things feel unresolved, when a plan changes without warning, when someone does not respond, and the silence stretches, when the day has gone sideways and something inside you needs to fix it immediately. It shows up as over-explaining, as needing to resolve conflict before you can sleep, as an inability to sit with ambiguity. The urgency pushes you toward action, toward closure, toward doing something that removes the uncertainty. Underneath it is a very old logic. Unresolved means unsafe, and unsafe means act now. By trying to force the world into predictability, you remain a hostage to its unpredictability. You are constantly straightening paintings on a wall that will not stay straight. Stability does not come from controlling outcomes. It comes from being able to sit inside uncertainty without needing to immediately resolve it. That capacity to remain present when things are unresolved is one of the quieter foundations of confidence. Why these emotions move faster than thought. Here is the thing worth understanding about all 5 of these. They are not personality traits. They are speed. Your mind prioritizes psychological protection over accuracy. It does not pause to assess whether the threat is real before sending the signal. It sends the signal first, and leaves the assessment to you afterward when the reaction has already happened. This is why reasoning with yourself in the middle of an emotional surge rarely works. You are trying to have a conversation with a system that already finished its job before you arrived. You are not failing a personality test when you react defensively. You are experiencing a protection program that was written long before you were born, running exactly as designed. The reactions are not mistakes. They are very fast, often imprecise, attempts to keep something safe. The identity friction here is where the harder question lives. You have likely lived with these reactions long enough to believe they are simply who you are. Yeah, I'm just an anxious person. I have a short temper. I'm too sensitive. These feel like accurate self-descriptions. But look at what they are doing underneath. They are converting a protection system into a personality trait. And as long as these reactions are your identity, you cannot change your relationship to them. You cannot change who you are. But you can observe a protective reflex. You can notice a pattern. You can recognize a signal without immediately becoming it. You are not an emotional person who lacks control. You are someone whose mind learned, with good reason, to move quickly when it detects certain kinds of threat. That distinction is not semantic. It changes what is actually possible. Every person who appears unshakable, every person whose steadiness you have ever quietly admired, feels these same 5 surges. For the fear of judgment does not disappear for them. The flash of anger still comes. The anxiety about what might happen still hums in the background. The difference is not that they feel less. It is that they have learned to recognize the signal without immediately obeying it. They notice the alarm, they acknowledge what it is pointing at, and then they decide, with a fraction more time than before, whether the protective response is actually needed in this moment. Awareness, not suppression. Confidence grows in the space between the feeling and the action, not through eliminating the emotion, not through forcing yourself to appear calm, not through telling yourself to stop reacting, just through the introduction of a small gap, a moment of recognition before the behavior follows. When the shame arrives, instead of becoming it, just notice. There it is again. When the anger rises, instead of firing, just notice. The alarm is going off. When the anxiety starts running simulations, instead of following every thread, just notice. My mind is trying to prepare me. That noticing does not stop the emotion. It does not make the surge smaller, but it changes what the surge means. It moves you from passenger to observer, and from observer, a different kind of response becomes available. Your mind chose protection. That is its function. Your function is to decide whether that protection is actually required right now. The emotions will still appear. They are part of the architecture. The next time one of them arrives, try not to fight it. Fighting is just another form of reactivity. Instead, just watch the signal. Then notice how long it takes for the heat to peak and begin to cool. Notice the exact thought your mind uses to pull you toward a defensive reaction. You are not broken. You are not too emotional. You are not failing at composure. You are reacting, and reacting means the system is working. The only question is whether you want the system to keep making the final decision, or whether you want to be the one who does. Your mind chose protection. Now you can choose what comes next.